On Thanksgiving Day, my affluent son visited and asked, "Did you like the lake house I gave you?" "Mom," in utter disbelief, I replied, "What house? I haven't received anything whatsoever." His daughter-in-law approached him with a careful and intentional stride, her motives shining through like the sparkle of gold in her gaze. "It's truly a pleasure to have you here with us. Come along with me on this adventure until the very end, and let me know the city you're connecting from, so I can truly value the distance my tale has reached." A seemingly simple question during Thanksgiving completely transformed my perception of my life in ways I could never have foreseen. For the past few years, I had been struggling to make ends meet on my janitor's salary, meticulously managing my blood pressure medication and braving the harsh cold in the same worn coat through 2 relentless winters. Still, I comforted myself with the thought that this was merely a temporary chapter and that more hopeful times were on the horizon. My son David built an extraordinary legacy from the very beginning. By the age of 35, he had established a successful tech consulting firm that employed over 200 people, even though our conversations had become limited to brief phone calls centered around work and client dealings. I couldn't help but feel a deep sense of pride for him. After losing his father 3 years ago, David threw himself into his work, and I truly grasped his need to handle his grief in that manner. The journey through grief is deeply personal for everyone. The mood in the house had shifted dramatically that Thanksgiving morning. I poured my heart into creating his favorite dishes, knowing all too well that the cost of groceries would mean skipping lunch for the week ahead. My snug kitchen felt a touch cluttered with all the pots and pans, but I was resolute in my efforts to prepare everything perfectly for his arrival. It had been 4 long months since we last stood before each other. As David entered my home, I was struck by the opulence that enveloped us. His watch, his shoes, and even his relaxed sweater probably cost more than my monthly rent. Trailing just a step behind him was Victoria, his beloved wife of 3 years. She wore a cream-colored coat that looked like it belonged in a fashion magazine. Her blonde hair, perfectly styled, despite the cold November wind. "Mom, the scent wafting through the house is incredible," David said, wrapping me in a brief embrace before stepping back to help Victoria with her coat. She presented me with that well-rehearsed smile, but there was a spark in her eyes that hinted at her contemplation of various choices. As we gathered around the dinner table, I was drawn in by David's infectious enthusiasm as he excitedly shared his plans to expand his business to the West Coast. Victoria chimed in occasionally, offering glimpses into their recent escapade in Europe and the thrilling changes they envisioned for their home. I nodded and smiled, but each detail resonated with the growing divide that set my life apart from theirs. As I served the pumpkin pie, David settled back in his chair, a grin blossoming on his face. "Mom, there's something that's been on my mind that I really need to share with you." I set the pie server down, my attention drawn completely to him. "How have you been enjoying the lake house I gave you 2 years ago? I see that the proximity to the water has consistently filled your heart with happiness." The words resonated with an unsettling precision. I looked at him, my lips slightly parted, trying to grasp the meaning of his words. "Is there a house by the lake?" A wave of bewilderment washed over me, making my heart pound with a fervor I couldn't dismiss. "Which lake house are you referring to?" "My dear," the lake house remained out of reach, and I could see the uncertainty flicker in David's smile. He glanced at Victoria, who had grown unexpectedly silent beside him. "The house by Lake Morrison. I transferred a gift to you for your birthday 2 years ago. Do you not remember?" I shook my head softly, a surge of lightheadedness enveloping me. "Is that really you?" "David, I remember the day I received a house. I've never encountered anything remotely similar to that. Are you really sure that you're not mixing me up with someone else?" Victoria suddenly stood up, her napkin falling from her fingers and dropping to the ground. "Oh, I just remembered," she said, her voice softening to a gentle tone. I need to follow up about the appointment set for tomorrow. Excuse me, if you don't mind. She rushed into the kitchen, her phone clutched tightly in her hand. Yet there was an unsettling quality to her movement, a palpable urgency that knotted my stomach. David's brow furrowed, his thoughtful mind diligently striving to unravel the mystery that lay ahead of him. Mom, that just doesn't seem possible. I had my assistant handle all the paperwork. The document should have been forwarded to you. Furthermore, there was an anticipation for the establishment of monthly maintenance payments. Will there be any monthly payments required? I felt my legs beginning to tremble beneath me. Could you please tell me the amount for the monthly payments? The total amount is $1,500. I've been providing you with support every month to help with your expenses. My assistant has assured me that everything is proceeding as anticipated. The room seemed to waver, enveloped in a fragile rhythm of doubt. $1,500 every month for a period of 2 years. The sum of $36,000 held the power to completely change the course of my life. Enough to take care of the medications I needed, to fix my car, to alleviate my worries about every grocery bill. I gripped the edge of the table with all my might. David, I assure you, I have not received any of the monthly payments. I've been struggling to manage the costs of my blood pressure medication. Last month, I faced a difficult decision between buying groceries and paying my electric bill. David's face drained of color. He rose suddenly, the sound of his chair dragging across the floor, breaking the silence. That can't be done. I possess documentation, including receipts and bank transfers. All details must be recorded. From the kitchen, Victoria's voice reached me, a soft yet pressing tone. Though the words remained just out of grasp, my hands began to shake as the gravity of the situation enveloped me. Reveal it to me, I murmured. Kindly present the documentation. David was already reaching for his phone, his fingers racing over the screen as he scrolled through emails, a sense of urgency building within him. I have all the copies right here at home, the transfer of ownership, the confirmations of payment. Mom, if you haven't received this money, then where has it been disappearing to? In perfect unison, we shifted our gaze toward the kitchen. Victoria's voice had fallen silent. The silence hung thick in the air, laden with unspoken remorse. I rose on shaky legs and made my way to the kitchen entrance. Victoria stood with her back to us, the phone pressed to her ear, yet silence enveloped her as she no longer spoke. Upon hearing our footsteps, she whirled around, her cheeks tinged with color. Is everything all right? David inquired, yet there was a noticeable shift in his tone. It was the tone he adopted during business meetings, when he sensed that someone was not being entirely honest. Victoria's smile appeared forced. Absolutely. Just wanted to double-check our dinner plans for tomorrow. But I could see it now, the guilt etched on her face, the way she struggled to meet my gaze, the anxious way she fiddled with her wedding ring. Victoria, David said with a measured tone, are you aware of any details regarding the lake house paperwork? You collaborated with my assistant on various matters during that period. The stillness that lingered seemed to stretch on forever. Victoria's lips parted and shut, yet silence enveloped her. In that instant, gazing at her expression, I understood. In some inexplicable manner, she had claimed what was rightfully mine. The Thanksgiving I had meticulously planned was on the verge of unraveling, threatening to shatter my family's bonds. The stillness in my cozy dining room hung heavily, poised on the brink of breaking. Victoria lingered in the kitchen doorway. Her hands, impeccably manicured, gripped each other with such intensity that her knuckles gleamed white. David's gaze was fixed on his wife, revealing an unfamiliar blend of bewilderment and deepening doubt. Victoria, I spoke softly, my tone more composed than my emotions allowed. Where has my lake house gone? She took a deep breath, her gaze flickering anxiously between David and me. I believe there may be a misunderstanding here. Perhaps the documents were misplaced during transit, or there might have been a mistake at the financial institution. Yet, as she uttered those words, I could sense the deception taking shape in her gaze. After spending 15 years as a janitor, tidying up offices in the quiet of the night, I developed a keen sense for understanding people. There's a unique perspective gained from being overlooked. As conversations unfold around you, seemingly unaware of your presence, Victoria was deceiving, and her attempts were rather clumsy. David retrieved his phone once more. I'm reaching out to Rebecca, my assistant. She took it all on herself. No, hold on, Victoria interjected urgently, moving closer. Perhaps we ought to have a private conversation about this before moving forward. Your mother has faced many challenges, and I want to be careful not to add to her burdens if this is merely a misunderstanding. A chill of fury began to rise within me. Could you possibly upset me even more? I had been subsisting on crackers and peanut butter for dinner most evenings, while she flaunted designer outfits and enjoyed European getaways. Yet I maintained a composed demeanor. Victoria, dear, I believe we've moved beyond the concern of causing me any distress. I'm looking for information about the location of my home. David was already making the call. In an instant, a woman's voice reached me from the other end. Rebecca, this is David. Please retrieve the documents for the lake house I bought for my mother 2 years back. Silence hung in the air. As David activated the speakerphone, Rebecca's voice resonated with newfound clarity. Absolutely, Mr. Harrison. The residence located at 1247 Lake Morrison Drive. The property was officially handed over to Margaret Harrison on November 15th, 2 years back. I possess copies of all the signed documents. My heart raced with intensity. That was my name, my address for the necessary documentation. Yet, I had never put my name on any document. What about the monthly payments? David inquired. Everything has been handled as you asked. $1,500 transferred on the 1st of every month to the account you specified. Account holder. Name, Margaret Harrison. Routing number, ending in 4782. I felt the blood drain from my face. I don't have an account ending in 4782. My account ends in 9156. David's eyes snapped to Victoria. Rebecca, can you read me the full account number? As Rebecca rattled off the numbers, I watched Victoria's face crumble. It wasn't my account. It wasn't even close. Rebecca, David said, his voice dangerously quiet. Who provided you with this account information? Your wife, sir. Mrs. Harrison called me in December 2 years ago and said there had been a change in your mother's banking information. She provided the new routing and account numbers and asked me to update all the records. The phone slipped slightly in David's hand. Victoria made a small, desperate sound in back of her throat. And the deed, David continued, where was it supposed to be mailed? To the address Mrs. Harrison provided. Let me see. 847 Maple Street. Apartment 2B. I'd never lived on Maple Street. I'd been in the same small house for 10 years. David hung up the phone, and the silence that followed was deafening. When he looked at Victoria, his face was completely blank, which somehow seemed more terrifying than anger would have been. Explain, he said simply. Victoria's composure finally shattered. Tears started flowing down her cheeks, but they looked more like panic than remorse. David, you have to understand, my parents were about to lose their house. They're elderly, and my father's medical bills were bankrupting them. I just borrowed the money temporarily. Borrowed. I whispered. You mean stole? No. Victoria's voice rose. I was going to pay it back. I just needed time. And the lake house. It's not like you were using it. My family needed a place to stay while they got back on their feet. I felt something crack inside my chest. Not like I was using it. Victoria, I've been working double shifts to afford my medication. I've been eating 1 meal a day to make my grocery money stretch. I haven't been able to turn my heat above 60 degrees because I can't afford the electric bill. David was staring at his wife like he'd never seen her before. Victoria, my mother could have died. What if she'd had a medical emergency and couldn't afford treatment? But she didn't, Victoria said desperately. She's fine. She's healthy. My father has diabetes and heart problems. He needed the money more. The callousness of her words hit me like a physical blow. Fine. Healthy. I thought about the nights I'd lain awake, chest tight with stress, wondering how I'd pay for my next prescription. The times I'd stood in the grocery store, calculator in hand, putting items back because I couldn't afford them. Where is my house now? I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. Victoria wiped her nose with the back of her hand, her designer makeup smearing. My parents are living there, and my brother's family. They've been renovating it, making improvements with my money. David said flatly. Victoria nodded miserably. I sank into my chair, feeling suddenly exhausted. For 2 years, I'd told myself that David was too busy to check on me regularly, that his success meant he didn't need to worry about his mother anymore. I'd been proud of his independence, even as I struggled alone, but all this time, he thought he was taking care of me. He thought I was comfortable and secure. Mom, David said, his voice cracking slightly. I'm so sorry. I thought you were okay. I thought you had everything you needed. I looked at my son, this successful man who'd worked so hard to build a better life. And I saw the little boy who used to promise he'd take care of me when he grew up. He tried to keep that promise, but the woman he trusted most in the world had stolen it from both of us. How much? I asked Victoria, how much of my money did you take? She was quiet for a long moment. All of it, she finally whispered. $36,000, plus a house that was probably worth at least $200,000 more. Victoria's family had been living like kings on money that was meant to keep me from poverty. David stood up slowly, his movements careful and controlled. Victoria, pack your things. I want you out of my house tonight. David, please, she begged, reaching for him. We can fix this. I'll make it right. I'll find a way to pay your mother back. He stepped away from her touch. With what money? You haven't worked a day since we got married. Everything you have, everything your family has been living on, was stolen from my mother. I watched my daughter-in-law fall apart, and I felt nothing. No pity, no satisfaction, just a hollow emptiness where trust used to be. She'd looked me in the eye for 2 years, had sat at this very table, knowing I was struggling while her family lived in luxury at my expense. As Victoria's sobs echoed through my small dining room, I realized that this Thanksgiving would indeed be unforgettable, but not because of the family gathering I'd hoped for. It would be remembered as the day I learned that sometimes the people who smile the brightest are the ones hiding the darkest secrets. After Victoria left that night, sobbing and begging for forgiveness that neither David nor I could give, my house felt different, quieter, but not peaceful. The silence was heavy with unanswered questions, and the weight of betrayal that seemed to settle into every corner. David wanted to call his lawyer immediately, but I asked him to wait, not because I was having second thoughts about pursuing this, but because something told me we needed to know the full extent of what Victoria had done before we moved forward. Thieves rarely steal just once, and I had a feeling this went deeper than a house and some monthly payments. Mom, you don't need to do anything, David said as he sat across from me at my kitchen table, his expensive suit wrinkled from the long, awful day. Let me handle everything. You've been through enough. But I shook my head. For 2 years, I'd been the victim of Victoria's lies. I'd been helpless, unknowing, while she systematically robbed me of what little security I might have had. Now I knew the truth, and I wasn't going to sit back and let others handle my business. I need to see it all. I told him every document, every bank record, every piece of paperwork. I need to understand exactly what she did to me. The next morning, after David went home to change clothes and gather documents, I called in sick to work for the first time in 2 years. Mrs. Henderson, my supervisor, was surprised but understanding when I told her I had a family emergency. If only she knew. David returned with boxes of paperwork and his laptop. We spread everything across my small dining table, the same table where Victoria had sat just hours before, playing the role of the concerned daughter-in-law while hiding her crimes. The first document we examined was the deed to the lake house. My signature was there, clear as day, on a document I'd never seen before. But as I stared at it, something seemed off. This isn't how I sign my name, I said, pointing to the signature. Look at the M in Margaret. I always make it with a little loop at the top, but this one is just straight lines. David pulled out his phone and took a picture of the signature, then found an old birthday card I'd signed for him last year. The differences were subtle but clear once you knew what to look for. She forged your signature, he said, his voice flat with anger. We kept digging. The bank records showed that the monthly payments had been going to an account that was indeed in my name. But at a bank I'd never done business with. Someone had opened an account using my personal information. "I need to see this account," I said. David called the bank, but they wouldn't give him information over the phone since he wasn't an account holder. So we drove there together, my hands shaking as I walked into the marble lobby of First National Bank with my driver's license and social security card. The account had been opened 2 years and 1 month ago, just weeks before the first payment was supposed to go to me. The address on file was 847 Maple Street, apartment 2B, the same address Rebecca had mentioned. The phone number listed wasn't mine either. "Ma'am," the bank representative said, looking confused as she scrolled through the records. "You've never actually been in this branch before, have you?" "No," I said firmly. "I've never been here in my life." She showed us the signature card from when the account was opened. The same fake version of my name, signed by someone who wasn't me. "This is identity theft," the representative said, her voice concerned. "You need to file a police report immediately." But we weren't done yet. David had brought copies of all his financial records related to my care. And as we sat in the bank's customer service area, a more complete picture began to emerge. The monthly payments were just the beginning. David had also been sending additional money for my medical expenses, money I'd never seen, $500 when he thought I needed new glasses, $800 for what he believed was dental work, $1,000 last Christmas as a bonus. Every single payment had gone to the fake account. "How much?" I asked, though I was afraid to hear the answer. David's fingers moved across his phone's calculator. His face went pale. $43,000. Over 2 years. She stole $43,000 from you. I felt dizzy. $43,000 was more money than I'd ever had in my life. It was enough to have changed everything, to have given me security and comfort in my older years, instead of the constant stress of living paycheck to paycheck. We drove to 847 Maple Street next. It was a rundown apartment complex on the other side of town, the kind of place with flickering neon signs and broken concrete steps. Apartment 2B was empty, with a for rent sign in the window. She probably rented it just long enough to establish the fake address, David said, his jaw tight with anger. But I was thinking about something else. David, how did she get my personal information? My social security number, my date of birth, all the details she'd need to open that account. He was quiet for a moment. From our house, I keep copies of important family documents in my home office. She would have had access to everything. The betrayal cut deeper with each new revelation. Victoria hadn't just seen an opportunity and taken it. She'd planned this carefully, systematically stealing my identity and my money while living in my son's house, eating at his table, pretending to love him. That evening, as we sat in my living room, surrounded by evidence of Victoria's crimes, David looked at me with tears in his eyes. "Mom, I'm so sorry. I trusted her completely. I never thought to verify that you were receiving the money because she was the one who suggested I send it in the first place." That detail hit me like ice water. "She suggested it." David nodded miserably. "About 6 months after Dad died, she mentioned how worried she was about you managing on your own. She said it would be a wonderful gesture if I could help with your expenses, especially since business was going so well. She even offered to coordinate with Rebecca to set everything up." I closed my eyes, feeling the full weight of Victoria's manipulation. She'd positioned herself as the caring daughter-in-law, concerned about her husband's struggling mother, while secretly ensuring that every dollar meant for me would end up in her family's pockets. And the lake house, same thing. She said you'd mentioned wanting to live near water, that it would be good for your health and peace of mind. She helped me find the property, negotiated the price, handled all the paperwork. Victoria had played my son like a violin, using his love for me against both of us. She'd made him feel generous and caring, while systematically robbing me of everything he tried to give me. As David gathered up the papers to take to his lawyer, I sat alone in my living room, staring at the walls I'd grown so familiar with over the past 2 years. This small, cramped space, with its old furniture and broken air conditioner, wasn't supposed to be my reality. I was supposed to be living comfortably in a beautiful house by the lake, with enough money to buy my medications without counting pennies. Instead, Victoria's parents were probably sitting by that lake right now, enjoying their stolen retirement, while I'd been rationing my blood pressure pills and wearing secondhand clothes. But knowing the truth, as painful as it was, felt like the first step toward getting my life back. Victoria had stolen more than money from me. She'd stolen 2 years of security, of dignity, of the peace of mind that comes with knowing your child is taking care of you. Tomorrow, we'd start the process of getting it all back. But tonight, for the first time in 2 years, I went to bed knowing exactly where I stood. And that knowledge, bitter as it was, felt like power. The morning David's lawyer called with the results of his investigation, I was scrubbing floors at the office building where I'd worked for the past decade. My knees ached against the cold tile, and my hands were raw from the industrial cleaning solutions. But I kept working because I needed every dollar from this job. At least I thought I did. Mrs. Harrison. Mr. Patterson's voice was grim when I called him back during my lunch break. We need to meet immediately. What we've uncovered goes far beyond what we initially suspected. David picked me up after my shift, his face drawn with exhaustion. He'd barely slept since Thanksgiving, throwing himself into the investigation with the same intensity he brought to his business deals. But this wasn't business. This was personal, and it was destroying him. At the lawyer's office, we sat across from Mr. Patterson as he laid out a file thick with documents. Victoria didn't just steal from you, Mrs. Harrison. She's been running what amounts to a small-scale fraud operation using your identity. The room seemed to tilt as he explained. Victoria had used my personal information to open not just the one bank account, but 3 separate accounts at different banks. She'd applied for credit cards in my name, taken out a small loan, and even filed false tax returns, claiming me as a dependent, while reporting income I'd never earned. The IRS has been trying to contact you about discrepancies in your tax filings. Mr. Patterson continued. They've been sending notices to the fake address. You're currently under investigation for tax evasion. I felt like I was drowning. Tax evasion. But I've filed my taxes honestly every year. We know that now, but the IRS doesn't. Victoria has been reporting that you received the money David sent, money that you never actually got. From their perspective, you've been hiding income. David's hands were clenched into fists. How much did she steal in total? Mr. Patterson flipped through several pages, including the original $43,000 plus additional credit card spending, loan proceeds, and fraudulent tax refunds. We're looking at approximately $78,000. The number hit me like a physical blow. $70,000. I made $18,000 a year scrubbing floors. Victoria had stolen more than 4 years of my salary. And the house, that's where it gets more complicated. Mr. Patterson said, the property is legally in your name, Mrs. Harrison. Based on the forged deed, Victoria's family has been living there, making improvements with the stolen money. And they've actually increased the property value significantly. I thought about Victoria's parents, whom I'd met only twice at family gatherings. They'd seemed like nice people, a little overwhelmed by their daughter's wealthy lifestyle, but grateful for her success. Had they known where the money was coming from? Had they known they were living in a house stolen from their son-in-law's mother? Can we get it back? David asked. Yes, but we'll need to involve law enforcement. This isn't a civil matter anymore. This is criminal fraud, identity theft, and tax evasion. Victoria could face serious prison time. I was quiet for a long moment, thinking about the woman who'd sat at my table just days ago, crying and begging for forgiveness. She'd seemed genuinely remorseful, but now I wondered if those tears had been real or just another manipulation. What about her family? I asked. Her parents, her brother with the children. Mr. Patterson's expression was sympathetic but firm. They'll have to vacate the property. If they can prove they didn't know the money was stolen, they might avoid criminal charges. But they can't keep what was bought with fraudulent funds. David was staring out the window, his jaw tight. Where is Victoria now? She's staying with her parents at the lake house. Mr. Patterson said, our investigator confirmed she's been there since she left your house on Thanksgiving. So she ran straight to the people who'd been living off my mother's stolen money. David said bitterly. Of course she did. That afternoon, we drove to Lake Morrison. I'd never seen the house that was supposedly mine. and as we pulled into the long driveway, I gasped, despite myself. It was beautiful, a sprawling ranch-style home with large windows overlooking the water, surrounded by mature trees and well-maintained gardens. This was what David had intended for me, this peaceful, comfortable place where I could have spent my retirement years watching the sunset over the lake, instead of worrying about whether I could afford my next meal. Victoria's father answered the door, his face falling when he saw David and me. "Oh," he said quietly, "we've been expecting you." Victoria appeared behind him, looking smaller and younger than I'd ever seen her. Her designer clothes had been replaced with jeans and an old sweater, and her face was puffy from crying. "Margaret," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "I'm so sorry." I looked at her, this woman who'd smiled at me across countless dinner tables while systematically destroying my financial security, and I felt nothing but cold anger. "Are you?" I asked. "Are you really sorry, Victoria? Or are you just sorry you got caught?" She started crying again, but I wasn't moved. I'd seen her tears before, had believed in them, had even felt sorry for her sometimes, when David worked long hours and she seemed lonely. "I never meant for it to go this far," she sobbed. "It started with just borrowing the first payment to help my parents with their mortgage. I was going to put it back before anyone noticed. But you didn't," David said, his voice like ice. "You took more and more. You stole my mother's identity, filed false tax returns, opened credit cards in her name. That's not borrowing, Victoria. That's fraud." Victoria's mother had appeared in the doorway, her face streaked with tears. "We didn't know," she said desperately. "We thought David was just being generous, helping us through a difficult time. Victoria told us he'd insisted on buying us the house." I looked at this older woman, probably close to my age, and I saw genuine shock and horror in her eyes. She hadn't known. None of them had known except Victoria. "The IRS thinks I'm a tax cheat because of what your daughter did," I said quietly. "I could go to prison because Victoria filed false returns in my name." Victoria's mother gasped, pressing a hand to her mouth. "Oh my God, Victoria, what have you done?" But Victoria just kept crying, offering excuses and apologies that meant nothing. She'd had 2 years to confess, 2 years to make this right, and she'd chosen to dig deeper instead. Mr. Patterson stepped forward with a briefcase full of legal documents. "Mrs. Stevens, I'm going to need you and your family to vacate this property within 30 days. Everything purchased with the fraudulent funds will need to be returned or compensated for." As I watched Victoria's family absorb the reality of their situation, I felt something I hadn't expected. Relief, not satisfaction, not revenge, just relief that the truth was finally out in the open. "The police will be here tomorrow to arrest Victoria," Mr. Patterson continued. "I'd recommend she turn herself in voluntarily." Victoria looked up at David with desperate eyes. "Please don't let them arrest me. I'll pay everything back. I promise. I'll get a job. I'll work day and night." David shook his head sadly. "With what skills? Victoria, you've never worked a day in your life. You don't even know how to work. All you know how to do is take." As we left the lake house, I turned back for one last look at the place that should have been my home for the past 2 years. Soon it would be, but it felt hollow now, tainted by the knowledge of how Victoria had stolen it from me. "Mom," David said as we drove away, "I'm going to make sure you never want for anything again. I'm going to take care of you the way I should have been doing all along." I patted his hand gently. "You were taking care of me, honey. It's not your fault that Victoria stole what you gave me." But as we drove back toward my small, cramped house, I knew that everything was about to change. Victoria would face the consequences of her crimes, and I would finally get the security and comfort that David had always intended for me to have. The confrontation was over. Now came justice. The divorce papers were finalized on a gray Tuesday in February, 3 months after that devastating Thanksgiving dinner. I sat in the courthouse hallway beside David as his lawyer emerged from the courtroom with news that Victoria had signed everything without contest. She'd already been sentenced to 18 months in prison for fraud and identity theft. and fighting the divorce would have only added legal fees she couldn't afford. "It's done," Mr. Patterson said, sitting down beside us. "The marriage is dissolved. All assets purchased with stolen funds revert to their rightful owners. Mrs. Harrison, you now legally own the lake house, and all the money in the fraudulent accounts has been frozen, pending full restitution." David let out a long breath. "What about her family?" "They vacated the property last week. Her parents moved in with her brother temporarily, and they've been surprisingly cooperative. I think they're genuinely horrified by what Victoria did." I felt a strange mix of relief and sadness. Relief that this nightmare was finally ending, but sadness for the collateral damage. Victoria's parents were innocent victims too. In their own way, they'd lost their home and their savings, all because their daughter had chosen to steal instead of asking for help. Honestly, the weeks that followed were a whirlwind of paperwork and adjustments. David threw himself into making things right with the same intensity he'd once brought to building his business. He hired a team of accountants to untangle Victoria's fraudulent tax filings, worked with the IRS to clear my name, and personally oversaw every detail of transferring ownership of the lake house back to me. But the most important change was in David himself. The successful businessman who'd been too busy for regular phone calls became a son who stopped by every few days, who called just to check on me, who insisted on taking me to doctor's appointments and grocery shopping. "You don't have to hover, honey," I told him one afternoon as he helped me pack the few belongings I wanted to keep from my old house. "I'm not going anywhere." He paused, enfolding one of my quilts, his hands stilling on the soft fabric. "Mom, I missed 2 years of your life because I was stupid enough to trust Victoria completely. I'm not missing anymore." I understood his guilt, even though I didn't think he deserved it. Victoria had been a master manipulator, playing on his love for me to hide her crimes. But I also understood that trust, once broken so completely, takes time to rebuild. Even trust in yourself. Moving into the lake house felt surreal. The place was beautiful, but it carried the weight of everything that had happened. Victoria's family had taken good care of it. I had to admit, the gardens were well maintained. The house was clean and updated, and they'd even added a screened porch overlooking the water that I fell in love with immediately. But it felt like moving into someone else's life rather than reclaiming my own. "We can change anything you want," David said as we walked through the rooms together. "New furniture, different paint colors, whatever would make it feel like home to you." I appreciated his thoughtfulness, but I wasn't sure new curtains would erase the knowledge that Victoria's father had sat in this living room for 2 years, reading his morning paper while I'd been rationing my medication 50 miles away. The financial restitution process was more complex than I'd expected. The accounts Victoria had opened in my name contained not just the money David had sent, but also funds from the credit cards she'd used and the loan she'd taken out. Untangling what belonged to whom required forensic accounting and months of documentation. The good news, my new financial advisor explained, is that when all is said and done, you'll have not just the original money your son sent, but also accumulated interest and some additional compensation for the identity theft. We're looking at approximately $95,000 once everything is recovered. $95,000. I'd never imagined having that kind of money. It was enough to live comfortably for years, to never worry about choosing between groceries and medication again, to actually enjoy my retirement instead of working until my body gave out. But the money felt strange in my hands, tainted by the knowledge of how it had been stolen and recovered. I found myself almost missing the simplicity of my old life, where I knew exactly where I stood, even if that place was barely getting by. The hardest part was dealing with the community's reaction. In a town the size of ours, Victoria's arrest and trial had been front-page news. Everyone knew what she'd done, and by extension, everyone knew that I'd been the victim of an elaborate fraud scheme. People's reactions varied wildly. Some were sympathetic, offering help and expressing outrage on my behalf. Others seemed almost suspicious, as if they couldn't believe I hadn't known what was happening. A few made comments that suggested they thought I should be grateful for the attention, as if being defrauded was somehow better than being ignored. The worst were the people who acted like I'd won the lottery instead of having my identity stolen. Well, at least it all worked out in the end. One neighbor said cheerfully, "Now you're sitting pretty by the lake." I wanted to shake them, to explain that having your daughter-in-law systematically steal your identity and rob you for 2 years isn't something that just works out, that the money in the house came with the knowledge that someone you trusted had viewed you as nothing more than a source of funds to exploit. But I kept my mouth shut and focused on rebuilding my life. The first night I spent alone in the lake house, I sat on the screened porch with a cup of tea, watching the sunset over the water. The view was beautiful, peaceful in a way I'd never experienced before. But I felt oddly detached from it, as if I were a guest in someone else's dream. My phone rang, and David's name appeared on the screen. He'd been calling every night since I'd moved in, checking to make sure I was settling in okay. "How are you feeling, Mom?" I looked out at the lake, trying to find words for the complicated mix of emotions churning inside me. "Grateful," I said finally, and sad, and angry, and confused, sometimes all at the same time. "That sounds about right," David said softly. "You know, I've been thinking about what Victoria said that last day, about how she never meant for it to go so far." I remembered her tears, her desperate apologies. What about it? I think she was telling the truth about that part. I think she really did start small and then couldn't stop. But that doesn't make it better, does it? If anything, it makes it worse. She had dozens of opportunities to confess, to make it right, and she chose to dig deeper every single time. He was right. Victoria's initial crime might have been impulse or desperation, but everything that followed had been calculated deception. She'd looked me in the eye at family dinners, had hugged me at holidays, had listened to me worry about money, all while knowing she was the reason I was struggling. "I keep thinking about how proud she seemed," I said, when she talked about her family's renovations to the house, the improvements they were making. She was proud of what they'd accomplished with my stolen money. "She wasn't just stealing from you, Mom. She was stealing from both of us. She stole the relationship we should have had these past 2 years. The peace of mind I thought I was giving you." After I hung up with David, I walked through the house that was finally, legally, undeniably mine. It was beautiful, comfortable, everything I could have wanted. But it would take time before it felt like home, instead of evidence of a crime. I settled into the master bedroom that night, in a bed that was mine, in a house that was mine, with enough money in the bank to last me the rest of my life. I should have felt triumphant. Instead, I felt exhausted. But as I drifted off to sleep, to the gentle sound of water lapping against the shore, I realized that exhaustion wasn't necessarily a bad thing. It was the exhaustion that comes after a long, difficult journey is finally over. Tomorrow, I could begin the work of making this stolen dream into something that truly belonged to me. 1 year later, I stood in the same screened porch where I'd spent that first confused night. But everything had changed. The space that had once felt foreign now wrapped around me like a comfortable embrace. I'd replaced Victoria's family's furniture with pieces that spoke to me, added plants that I'd chosen myself, and hung photos that told the story of my real life, rather than someone else's stolen dream. The morning routine I'd developed had become sacred to me. Coffee on the porch as the sun came up over the lake, watching the water change colors with the light. It was a luxury I'd never imagined I'd have. This peace, this time, to simply exist without the constant weight of financial worry. David's car pulled into the driveway, right on schedule for our weekly breakfast together. This tradition had started months ago. After his initial guilt-driven hovering had settled into something more natural, we'd both learned to navigate this new relationship, one built on honesty, rather than the false foundation Victoria had created. "Morning, Mom," he called as he came through the front door, carrying a bag from the bakery in town. "I brought those cinnamon rolls you like." I smiled, setting 2 plates on the kitchen table. "You don't have to bring me pastries every week, Honey, I'm perfectly capable of feeding myself now. He grinned. I know you are, but I like bringing them. Besides, Mrs. Chen at the bakery always asks about you. Half the town has adopted you as their favorite success story. It was true. The same community that had whispered about my situation during Victoria's trial had embraced me once justice was served. People stopped me at the grocery store to ask how I was settling in. Neighbors brought casseroles when I first moved to the lake, and the mailman made sure to mention whenever he had good news to deliver. Any word from the lawyer about Victoria's appeal? I asked as we settled into our usual spots at the table. David shook his head. Her public defender filed the paperwork. But Mr. Patterson says it's basically a formality. The evidence was too overwhelming, and she pled guilty to everything. She'll serve her full sentence. 18 months had seemed like such a short time when the judge announced it. But as the seasons changed and my new life took shape, I'd stopped thinking about Victoria's timeline and started focusing on my own. How do you feel about that? David asked, studying my face carefully. I considered the question seriously. A year ago, I might have wanted Victoria to suffer more, to face consequences that matched the scale of what she'd stolen from me. But now, sitting in the house that was truly mine, with money in the bank and my son's genuine attention, revenge felt less important than it once had. I feel like she's where she needs to be, I said finally, not because I want her to suffer, but because she needs to face real consequences for what she did. Maybe prison will teach her something that our family never could. Through the legal process, I'd learned more about Victoria's psychology than I'd ever wanted to know. She'd grown up in a family that struggled financially, always comparing themselves to others who had more. When she married David, she'd suddenly had access to wealth she'd never imagined. But apparently, it hadn't been enough. She'd needed to feel like she was the provider, the one who could solve her family's problems. The therapist her lawyer recommended says she has something called entitlement syndrome. David had told me months ago. She genuinely believed she deserved whatever she could take because life had been unfair to her. I'd thought about that explanation for a long time. Life had been unfair to me too, when I'd lost my husband and found myself struggling to make ends meet. But I'd never considered that unfairness gave me the right to steal from others. Have you heard anything about her family? I asked. David nodded. Her parents moved to Arizona to live with her aunt. Her brother found a job in another state. They're starting over. Basically, I felt a pang of sympathy for them. Victoria's crimes had destroyed more lives than just mine. Her parents had lost their home and their savings. Her brother's children had been uprooted from their schools and friends, all because Victoria had chosen theft over honesty. I've been thinking about writing them a letter, I said. David's eyebrows rose. Really? What would you say? That I don't blame them? That I hope they're doing okay? I paused, stirring sugar into my coffee. Victoria made her choices, but they didn't deserve to pay for them. We sat in comfortable silence for a while, looking out at the lake. A family of ducks had taken up residence near the shore, and I'd gotten into the habit of tossing them breadcrumbs from my morning toast. Simple pleasures that I'd never had time for, when every moment was consumed with survival. I have something to tell you, David said eventually, his tone shifting to something more serious. I looked at him expectantly. I've been seeing someone, a woman I met at a business conference. Her name is Jennifer, and she's nothing like Victoria. I felt a flutter of anxiety, then forced myself to relax. Tell me about her. She's a forensic accountant. Actually, she helps companies investigate financial irregularities. She knows what Victoria did, knows the whole story, and she's not interested in my money. She makes good money of her own. I smiled. A forensic accountant, you say? How intriguing. That feels perfectly aligned. David let out a gentle laugh, a comforting smile blossoming on his face. I thought you might appreciate the irony in this situation. She has an extraordinary candor, frequently characterized by an unwavering straightforwardness. During our third date, she opened up about her perspective, hinting that my inclination to trust could benefit from some reconsideration, and encouraging me to prioritize setting stronger boundaries. Smart and insightful individual. When will I get the opportunity to meet her? The choice is completely yours. This time, I'm savoring each moment and allowing things to unfold naturally. I'm embracing the significance of trusting my own instincts, which means releasing the desire for external validation before truly grasping my own emotions. I reached out, my hand finding his across the table, creating a tender moment of connection between us. I'm truly pleased to witness your thoughtful approach to this, and when the moment feels right for you, I would be thrilled to meet her. After David left, I set off on my usual walk around the grounds. The gardens that Victoria's family had lovingly tended blossomed magnificently under my care. Yet I had added my own unique touch to them. A garden bursting with colorful tomatoes and aromatic herbs. A snug reading nook tucked under the wide, reaching limbs of a venerable oak. And a delightful bird feeder that invited the joyful presence of cardinals and blue jays. The house was intertwining with my existence in ways that went beyond simple legal possession. It was filled with my choices, my memories, my tranquil daily practices that stayed untainted by outside influence, authentic and unwavering. That afternoon, I finally made the decision I had been pondering for weeks. I contacted my previous supervisor at the cleaning company. Dear Mrs. Henderson, I am Margaret Harrison. I wanted to let you know that I won't be coming back to work. A hush fell over the room, wrapping everyone in a shared stillness. Is everything all right? Margaret, it appears you've been gone for a while now. I feel a vibrant energy coursing through me, a truth that brings a smile to my face. I'm embarking on a new chapter of life as I transition into retirement. It felt strange to say the word. I never imagined that retirement would be part of my journey. I always thought I would continue working until I simply couldn't anymore. Yet, with the funds that Victoria had taken now returned to me, along with the house and David's steadfast support, I was finally able to leave behind the days of serving others and start to truly embrace my own life. That evening, I settled onto my porch with a glass of wine, captivated by the sunset as it painted the lake in stunning shades of gold and pink. The gentle vibration of my phone indicated a message from David. Jennifer is eager to discover whether Italian cuisine resonates with you. She's thinking about cooking a meal for you next weekend. I provided my response in written form. Kindly inform her that I have a love for Italian cuisine, but she shouldn't feel pressured to make any special efforts to impress me. I hold a special place in my heart for those who add happiness to my son's world. As the twilight settled over the water, I pondered the woman I had once been just a year ago, worn out, struggling, achieving, but quietly longing. She could barely comprehend that such serenity could be real, this sense of security and contentment. Victoria had claimed 2 years of my life, but in a surprising turn of events, her choices had also granted me an experience I might never have encountered otherwise. They had urged David to truly see me, to understand that I needed more than just financial support. I longed for him to be near, to focus solely on me, and to show genuine care. A truth about my own resilience had been unveiled. I had weathered the theft, traversed the investigation, confronted the trial, and embarked on the complex path of reclaiming my identity and my life. I unearthed a strength within myself that I had not acknowledged before, a resilience that exceeded anything I had faced in the past. I had also unearthed a deep understanding of forgiveness, not forgiveness for Victoria, who would require a genuine transformation that I might never witness, but forgiveness for myself, for being naive enough to succumb to her deceit, and forgiveness for David, who had been just as profoundly caught in her web as I had been. As I locked up the house and headed to bed, a deep sense of satisfaction enveloped me, a reward for a day fully lived and a life renewed. Tomorrow would reveal new small pleasures, soft joys, and peaceful moments of calm that were untouched by the outside world. The lake house that had once been the site of Victoria's tragic events had now become my sanctuary. The money that was taken and eventually recovered had become my shield. The young one, who had once been led astray into ignoring my presence, had blossomed into my steadfast companion. Victoria tried to alter the course of my life, but in the end, she only delayed what was meant to be. In that instant, it was wholly mine, granting me the freedom to live life as I chose. And I welcome serenity. Now, I find myself captivated by those of you who have chosen to listen to my journey. What would you do if you were in my shoes? Have you ever gone through something like this? We'd love to hear your reflections in the comments below. For now, I'm sharing 2 other tales that have captured the hearts of our readers, and they are bound to surprise you. We truly appreciate your presence and support up to this moment.